All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something that can be, well, a little bit awkward, especially when you're new at a job, asking for favors, when you need help, but everyone's super busy.
Yeah, definitely. It's that feeling of, I don't want to bother anyone, but
Exactly. And to really get into this, we're looking at a scenario from the Fluent Speak podcast. They focus on practical English, and in this episode, they've got this character, Rachel, who's totally new at her job.
oh, I remember Rachel. She's trying so hard to be polite, but it's almost painful.
It really is. She keeps saying things like, sorry to bother you, excuse me, can I ask you a favor? Over and over.
Like she's apologizing for even existing.
And the people around her, totally dismissive. It's like a comedy of missed cues.
Which is interesting, right? Because she is being polite, but maybe that's actually the problem.
You think so?
Think about it. If you're swamped and someone comes up all hesitant, it's easy to just brush them off.
Like when you bump into someone and they're like, oh, sorry. And you're like, no problem, no problem. Just trying to keep things moving.
Exactly. But in the workplace, especially when you need something, that hesitant approach might not work.
So what's the alternative?
Well, that's where the Fluent Speak podcast hosts offer some really good advice. They break down key phrases that can totally change the game.
Like magic words?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Phrases that might seem basic, but they make you sound more confident and help you get your point across.
Ooh, I like that. What kind of phrases are we talking about?
Well, for starters, they talk about phrases like welcome on board, which we all know.
Right.
But then they go into about to, which they explain in a way I'd never thought of before.
How so?
It's like a subtle way of saying, hey, I'm about to start this task, and a little help would be great right now.
Ah, I see, like a polite nudge.
Exactly. It implies you've already put in some effort, so you're not just dumping the problem on someone else.
Makes sense. What else?
They also talk about instead. It's great for suggesting alternatives or shifting the direction of a conversation without being confrontational.
Oh, that's helpful. Especially when you're new and trying to find your footing.
Definitely. It's about being assertive, but in a collaborative way.
So we've got welcome on board, about to instead. Anything else?
Well, this one's a bit trickier, but it's super important in a busy office. How to interrupt politely.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one. No one wants to be that person.
Right. But sometimes you have to interrupt. So the key is to do it in a way that shows respect for the other person's time.
Like reading the room, right? Picking your moment.
Exactly. And being mindful of how your interruption might affect them.
So how do you do that? How do you interrupt without being rude? Have you ever been on the receiving end of, like, a really bad interruption?
Ugh, yeah. It's like, you're trying to focus and then bam, train of thought gone.
Totally. It makes you feel like the other person just doesn't care. But in the Fluent Speak podcast, they give some good phrases for interrupting without sounding like a jerk.
Oh, right. Like what?
They suggest things like, I hate to interrupt, but I have a quick question about, or do you mind if I jump in here? I had a thought about.
Oh, I see. So it's like you're acknowledging that you are interrupting.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the other person, not just barging in. And once you've got that down, the podcast also gives some good examples for actually asking for the favor.
Okay, so what do they suggest?
Well, they say to be direct and clear, like, can I ask you a favor? Could you help me with this? But it's not just the words, it's also how you say it,
Right, like your tone of voice.
Exactly. If you sound all timid and unsure, people might not take you seriously.
And that's where confidence comes in. The Fluent Speak podcast really emphasizes practicing these phrases so you sound more confident.
Yeah, it's like the more you practice, the smoother it'll come out when you actually need to ask for help.
It's like anything else. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And speaking of asking for help, remember that funny part in the podcast where Rachel finally says what she needs?
Oh, yeah. All that time, and she just needed to find the bathroom.
That's like a classic example of how we sometimes overthink things,
Totally. Imagine if she had just said up front, excuse me, I'm new here. Where's the bathroom?
Right. Sometimes being direct is actually the most polite thing you can do.
Yeah.
It saves everyone time and hassle.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening, think about times when you've hesitated to ask for help. Or maybe you asked in a way that wasn't very clear. What was going on in those situations? What made you hesitate?
Was it like you didn't want to seem dumb? Or you felt bad about interrupting someone?
It's totally normal to feel that way, especially when you're new. But the thing is, everyone's been there. We've all had those moments of feeling lost or unsure in a new job.
It's all part of the learning curve.
Exactly. And, this whole discussion about asking for favors, it got me thinking, We're focusing on the words, but there's also all this unspoken stuff that goes on in offices, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like the whole vibe of the place.
Right. The
Yeah.
relationships between people, who's in charge, all those unwritten rules.
It's like the words are just one part of the equation.
Exactly. And that's where things like emotional intelligence come in.
Yeah, being able to read the room, sense when it's a good time to approach someone.
So it's not just T about using the right words, it's also about understanding the whole situation.
Yeah, it's like you need this whole other skill set just to navigate the office politics.
Totally. And sometimes those unspoken dynamics, they can be even more important than the words you use.
How so?
Well, think about it. You could use the perfect phrase, super polite, everything. But if you haven't built up any kind of relationship with the person.
Or if they're like way higher up than you.
Exactly. It might not matter how well you ask. It's just not the right time or the right way. So it's like you need to be aware of the context, not just the words.
Exactly. And being able to do that, to read the situation, that's where emotional intelligence comes in.
Okay, so that makes sense. But how do you actually develop that? Especially if you're new somewhere.
Well, I'd say, first of all, just pay attention. Observe.
Observe what?
Like, how do people in the office interact? What's the overall atmosphere like? Formal, relaxed? How do they handle things when they disagree? Just by watching, you can start to pick up on those unspoken rules.
It's like you're a detective trying to figure out the clues.
Right. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're not sure about something, just ask someone.
Like a coworker you trust.
Yeah. Most people are happy to help, especially if they can see you're genuinely trying to fit in.
And it shows you're eager to learn,
Yeah.
right? Which is always a good thing.
Definitely. And remember, building those relationships, it takes time. You're not going to be best friends with everyone on day one.
Right. Just be friendly, be yourself.
Exactly. Those little things, they go a long way.
So to sum it all up, we've talked about the words you use when asking for favors,
The phrases, the tone of voice.
but also the bigger picture, like office dynamics and emotional intelligence.
And it's not just about asking for favors, it's about being helpful yourself, too.
Oh, right. Like creating that environment where everyone feels comfortable helping each other out.
Exactly. It goes both ways.
So for everyone listening, as you navigate your workplace, remember, words are important, but so is the context, the relationships you build, and your ability to read the room.
Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep paying attention.
And who knows, maybe one day you will be the one giving advice on how to handle those tricky situations.
Until next time, happy diving.